Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SCRC's Let's Talk Caregiving. I'm your host, Roberto Velasquez, President and CEO of Southern Caregiver Resource Center, and I'm here as always with my co host, Marta Rañón, our Executive Vice President. Hi, Marta.
Hey, Roberto.
Today's special guest is Larry Griner. Larry was a full time caregiver for 6 years for his mom, who had Alzheimer's. Through their journey, he found a way to connect with his mother in a profound way that awakened her mind and helped them enjoy some very special moments, which then started sharing with the world through social media. Since his mom's passing, Larry's passion has become to help others learn what to expect, how to prepare, and also how to enjoy their journey as much as possible when caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's. We're so happy you're here with us today, Larry. Thank you for joining our show.
Thank you for having me.
Larry, I am so excited to be speaking with you. I have known a little bit about your story and the experience that you had when you were caring with your mother. And I understand your mother had Alzheimer's. And for a lot of our audience members, our clients, they are taking care of someone with Alzheimer's, which tends to be very challenging. As you know, it's a progressive degenerative disease. There is no cure. And really, it becomes sometimes very challenging for the family caregiver to kind of go through that transition with the person that they're caring, especially here in this case for you, your mother. So I wanted to see if you can tell us a little bit about how, what your experience was like during that journey when you first started taking care of her in the progression of the disease?
It's nothing you can prepare for. My brother had taken care of my mother for 4 years prior to me going home and relieving him. And I knew of his frustrations, but I didn't know how those frustrations were created. And you only know that once you start taking care of your loved one. You're recognizing the the evenings when they have the sundowners, recognizing you're answering the same questions over and over again. And then in some cases, dependent upon how far along the disease is, the physical aspects that you have to deal with, the weakness of the body and just whatever it is. Everybody's circumstances are different. The disease affects everybody differently. But the one thing I do see is the disease affects the caregiver the same, the emotional toll that it takes. It's hard enough dealing with those conditions on the day in, day out. It's even harder to do it with somebody that you love, your mother, your father, somebody you never ever saw yourself having to care for in this manner. And then having to do that day by day by day. You say it's Groundhog's Day because you already know what to expect each day, and that's the frustration, lack of patience, just being tired, the loneliness, all those emotions. Those all remain the same for every single caregiver. But your circumstances can change also, depending upon the stages the disease is at with your loved ones. So it's a learning experience going through. When you first start it, when I first went home to care for my mother, it broke me in 2 weeks to the point I was crying in bed, just saying, how am I going to do this? But then you have to pull yourself together and say, you have to do it. And eventually you become a little bit stronger just to get through the day. You get a little bit stronger by recognizing how you connect with your loved one. And again, it's a day by day learning experience just to recognize, okay, I did it today. How am I going to get through tomorrow? Let me try this. And if you find something that works, I was lucky to find something that worked on a regular basis with my mother using music. So I knew that I had that to fall back upon. That was my tool. And I started to recognize that not just with my mother, but other people that had reached out to me who saw mom's videos online on Facebook said, oh, wait a minute, let me try this. And it started happening for them also. So I was validated with what worked with mom. And then I was also validated by the science that said, hey, music works with a lot of people with Alzheimer's.
Thank you for sharing that, Larry. What you're saying, it just resonates because we hear this from a lot of family caregivers. And in 2 weeks, you mentioned in your 2 weeks there, you were already overwhelmed. And people are caregivers for 8, 10, 15 years. And many of them with little to no help. and in addition, begin to suffer, as you were mentioning, your own the impact that it has on the caregiver, begin to suffer from physical ailments themselves, not even caring for their own chronic conditions or challenges that they might have, as well as emotional distress and even clinical depression. A good percentage of family caregivers, maybe 30-40%, suffer from clinical depression, and they don't even know it because they're so in the weeds in the caregiving that they're not even aware that they're suffering as much in a different way.
Larry, I was really focused on what you were saying, that you were able to manage, some of the situations with activities that were beneficial to your mom and that other people emulated, which is great. I'm really curious to know, how is it that you, Larry, were able to manage the stress that Roberto was just mentioning? Because it is true. I was a caregiver and I was caring for my great aunt who had dementia, and that takes a toll on you. You want them to get better, but you can't. And you are, repeating the same question. They're repeating the same question. You're trying to answer the same question over and over. And sometimes it does lead to frustration and stress and even clinical depression, like Roberto was mentioning. So I'm wondering, what is it that you did that helped you, so that maybe our listeners out there can maybe, utilize some of those strategies on their situation?
Well, I do have to emphasize that I know when I talk to people, I always say I was the luckiest caregiver in the world because I had a caregiver that was brought in by my brother when my mom was first diagnosed. We had somebody 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. We were lucky with that. And going home, not only did I have that while I was still at home, I had two brothers that were local that could come and relieve me. Not a lot of people have that also. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I started to recognize, it wasn't just a matter of having that time to get away, because you don't get away emotionally and mentally. You can walk out of the room, but you know what you're coming back to. And then on the other half, the other side of that is, again, you're watching your mother go through something you cannot stop, and you know it's only going to get worse in time. For me, definitely, even with the help I had, I made sure that I got out and I exercised in the morning. Um, the bigger picture I saw that helped me get through, sustained me, gave me actually therapy during that time frame. Not only the community that I made or was able to find online with mom's videos, people loving her there, and we were in contact with each other. For me, once I found that one thing, which was music, interaction, activity for mom, knowing that she was enjoying that, man, I looked forward to that every single day, because not only did she enjoy those moments, I enjoyed it immensely because I didn't know what I was going to get each time. Now I had something to look forward to the next day and the next day and the next day. Doesn't mean those days didn't still have those trying times, the sundowners in the evenings, or the confusion, or the "Hey, are you my son?" moments, which really drop you back, two steps. Um, I recognize that, again, just having that opportunity to see the changes in my mother, where she wasn't just sitting in a chair staring out a window with a blank look on her face. I was able to manipulate that, have her enjoy that, bring out something of her old self to the present, and enjoy that together. So that helped sustain me. But that still didn't uh, cure me, as I might say. So, I just did what I could each day to make the most for her, which helped me get through those days.
Yeah, Larry, and thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that I know, and it's very important for individuals who are caregivers, is to find those things of interest that their loved ones used to enjoy or maybe still enjoy, but haven't practiced it in a long time.
Right.
In your case, it was music, and that was fantastic. In some cases, it's other types of activities. It could be
Correct.
walking, it could be going to the beach if they love the beach and the sand. It could be, you know, uh, I don't know, just all kinds of different activities, but it's specific to them. It's not what you want to impose on them. It's something
Correct.
that they enjoyed, and that brings out these beautiful memories and pleasant and very enjoyable times.
Correct.
I was thinking about my aunt when I was caring for her, and she loved to garden. And it took me a while to realize that that was her interest that really got her out of that blank stare and just kind of being bored and asking the same question. And of course, caregivers kind of, we realize those moments the hard way, right? Until we finally realize that, oh, this is what we should be doing. And
This is
that's by
what
knowing
works.
that that's right.
Right.
Um, but she loved to garden. And so we would go out there and I would just say, hey, could you help me how to garden, how to plant this? I'm not sure where I should put it. And I knew, I mean, I could read the little description of where to plant it in the shade or in the sun, but she would instruct me and then she would say, well, here, this is how you do it. So then it became a really wonderful experience for us to do that on a regular basis. And you can see her light up, you can see her get excited. And then when the times that we would sit back and look at, let's say we were planting tomatoes, right? And she would say, oh, now we can make some salsa with this and let's go make it
Mhm.
together. And it just kind of kept giving us more, this little plant, this little tomato plant kept giving us more experiences together.
One of the things I recognize is my mom was limited as far as some of those activities. She loved flowers, was always out in the garden. So I would plant the flowers for at least she could enjoy them, and I put her out in our yard and just have her enjoy the things that I was putting. So she was stimulated. She was stimulated
Mm-hmm.
visually. She was stimulated by the aromas. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I kept saying to people, as I came across somebody that was just struggling, you got to get them out of the regular. The regular was sitting in a chair, staring at a wall, staring at a TV, listening to a radio station they're not even familiar with. You got to give them something, as we have talked about, something that they enjoyed. Hopefully, that it brings them back. Sometimes you can create different things that they can enjoy, additional walks, in areas they've never been to because it's a different stimuli. And I say to people, they're still people. They need touch, they need smell, they need interaction, they need feeling. All those things will bring something back in them. I can guarantee that.
Mm-hmm.
I know for my grandmother, she loved church. All her adult life, church, church, church. During the week, on the weekend, on Sundays, just church, church, church. So she loved to go to church and sing in the hymns and do the prayers and take her rosary with her and just sit there and just it was a big production and show for her because that was what was so um such an important
Ingrained in
piece of her life and and
right,
and and she was able to enjoy that and
right.
I used to get a kick out of the songs and everything and just learn some of the hymns in Spanish and so forth and because my grandmother we'd go to the Spanish masses and everything and she just loved that and she would just come to life when that
Right.
was happening and again outside of the house outside of the norm go to the place where she enjoyed to be so that was her daycare is going to church for an hour or two you know
When I talk to people about music and they say, "Oh, yeah, my mom doesn't perform and all this stuff," no, music's been in everybody's life. Whether or not it's Christmas songs, you can sing Christmas songs year round because those lyrics have stayed in us. The tune you can tap your toes to all the time, Um, but that just seems to awaken everybody because it's something different than what's going through their head. You're actually putting something in their head for them to enjoy.
It's interesting that you say that because I think people assume, well, the person has to be a singer to be able to do this
Mm.
again. And it doesn't have to be that. My aunt, every time it would rain and it would look like it was rain or it was going to rain, the clouds were getting darker and the wind was getting a little bit cooler, she would start singing a song that, maybe our audience member might know it, but it was in Spanish, Parece que va a llover. And she would just start singing it and she would say one line and then we would say the other and then she would say one line the other next line and then we would say the other and then before you know it we were singing it together and she would start laughing because we ended up singing the song together and so
Right.
every time it was so beautiful because she would just be looking out there and she would be you know parece que va a llover and then we would do the next line So now every time it's about to rain, I think of her because that's kind of what we would do before it would start raining. And it's such a beautiful memory that I have of her.
The majority of the music that I even played for mom in the beginning was the classical music that she loved. So she was familiarized. She knows every single note. And she would follow that song from beginning to end. And then I started to gravitate to things that were just on the radio from the past year, and she would pick it up after a couple times of listening to it because it was something that she could flow with. And then she just started. If you go onto Facebook and see mom do her crazy things, she's doing stuff to Mick Jagger, Maroon 5, Justin Timberlake. And I guarantee you she never heard those songs in the past 5 to 10 years. But she found something to connect with and find something, a rhythm that she could tap her toes to. And eventually, by listening to the words, even start to sing some of the choruses. So that was positive for us.
You're finding something that's unique to them, unique to their history, their experiences, and that really makes a big difference in their wanting to participate in that. Even if they're reluctant at first, you just start singing hymns, and that's something that they loved. They will jump right in. And it's really interesting because it makes people come to life. I mean, I've also seen videos of people that are just sitting there in a nursing home, and they have this like blank affect, and they're just staring, and there's no movement, and they put on certain music, and they just come to life, and they start hymning and humming and singing and even tapping their feet, and things of that nature, and it just brings people to life. But again, it's finding those things that actually kind of creates a pathway to memories, to
Awesome.
the days
Right.
that they enjoyed. It takes them away from just sitting there with nothing to talk about or do.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also not just the memories that they are recalling, but what I really want caregivers to know, and maybe look at it this way too, is you are creating new memories with those individuals
Bingo.
that you're caring for. I think that's the key because, all of us who have been caregivers, especially of someone who has had dementia or Alzheimer's or memory loss, you know that it's now a different relationship, that you have to
Mm-hmm.
approach it differently. You talked about your mother, Norma, forgetting who you were. My aunt would forget who I was as well. So then I had to kind of recognize that now it's a new relationship. And in this new relationship, let's create new memories. And so we had new activities that I never had with my aunt growing up.
Right.
We just didn't share that. But then we created new ones. I don't know if you feel that way, Larry.
When I tell people when they're just starting out, you are now their memory. You're creating moments for your loved one because they don't have the memory 5 minutes later from what you did 5 minutes before. You have the
Mhm.
memory now. That will sustain you. When you know that you've made a difference in their day, you've made a difference in their life. You made a difference in the caregiver's life. So in creating those moments, and that's what I did with my mom, I created moment after moment after moment and I put it on videotape and then I shared it on Facebook. So now I can go back. I do it now with her being gone. That sustains me. And it helped me back then. And it also helped them when they're able to see themselves enjoying themselves on tape if you can capture that moment. But those are the things that you're going to say way in the future. I wish I had. I wish I had. My mantra when I talk to people, never get to the point where you're saying, I wish I had. Get to the point where you're saying, I'm glad I did. And
Mhm.
that's basically being a caregiver. I haven't talked to a single caregiver that wouldn't go back, even with the tough times, to say I wouldn't do it all over again. And I'm the same way. So
Yeah, and I
it is.
think that's just great that you're sharing all this wonderful information, and with our listeners. I think that also I want to just make sure that our listeners know that, if they're struggling, if they're finding themselves overwhelmed, that they should definitely reach out for help, because and to organizations like Southern Caregiver Resource Center, where we can assess their needs, we can help them develop a care plan, we can connect them to services, provide them support groups. Martha has a menu of educational programs that are all online and people can look at to learn skills and learn how to be better caregivers. But there are resources, and people should reach out to those professionals that can understand them and help them get out of the weeds, so that they can enjoy, the parts that they can enjoy and take care of themselves.
And if you have in your community or someplace somebody that's also a caregiver, they're a great resource. And if not just so much a resource, but definitely that friend that you can call upon to who understands what you're going through. That is a I can't say that's one of the most important things I can say. A community of caregivers really is your strongest support. Along with your organization, Alzheimer's Association. Those individuals can give you a couple specifics, but somebody you can pick up the phone and know by name right offhand and tell, this is how I'm feeling. You only have to go so far as to say hello, and then you're already on the same plane.
Very beautifully said. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have left for this edition of Let's Talk Caregiving. To hear more of our podcasts, follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or visit our website at scrc.care. I want to thank Martha for co-hosting another important discussion, and our guest, Larry Griner, and our audience for tuning in. If you're providing support to a loved one, you don't have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. To connect to our programs and services, visit our website at scrc.care or call us at 1-800-827-1008. If you live outside of San Diego and Imperial Counties, visit caregivercalifornia.org to connect to the Caregiver Resource Center nearest you. To support our efforts and make a tax-deductible donation, please go to scrc.care and click on the donate button. And remember, SCRC is here for you,
Caring for those who care for others.